My own sister called me a beggar in front of her entire bank for asking to withdraw $100. Elena Martinez, head manager at First National Bank, didn't recognize me after 15 years apart. I looked ordinary in my worn jeans and old sneakers. She had no idea that her beggar sister was about to make the largest withdrawal in bank history. What happened next would destroy her career and change both our lives forever. By the end, she'd be the one begging, not for money, but for forgiveness. But let me take you back to where it all started. Elena and I weren't always strangers. Picture this: two little girls sharing a twin bed in a cramped apartment in Queens, whispering secrets under a faded Disney princess comforter. That was Elena and me, 25 years ago. We were inseparable back then. She was 8, I was 10, and we had this unbreakable bond that only sisters could understand. Our parents, Maria and Carlos Martinez, worked double shifts just to keep food on the table. Dad drove a taxi 16 hours a day, and Mom cleaned office buildings until her hands were raw. They were good people, hard-working people, but they had very different visions for their daughters' futures. Elena was the pretty one. Even as a kid, she had these perfect ringlet curls and this sweet smile that made adults melt. She'd play dress-up with Mom's old clothes, pretending to be a businesswoman, carrying around an empty briefcase and saying things like, "I'm going to work in a big office with important people." Mom would beam with pride, already envisioning Elena in a corner office somewhere. I was different. While Elena played banker with her toy cash register, I was in the corner with broken electronics Dad brought home from the taxi garage, trying to figure out how they worked. I'd stay up past bedtime with a flashlight, reading library books about computers that were way too advanced for a 10-year-old. Mom would shake her head and say, "Rachel, mija, you need to be more practical like your sister." The first crack in our perfect sisterhood appeared when Elena turned 12. That's when she started caring about appearances. Suddenly, it mattered that my jeans had patches, that my sneakers were hand-me-downs from our cousin Miguel. Elena would walk ahead of me at school, pretending we weren't related when her new friends were around. "Why can't you just try to look normal?" she'd whisper harshly when we got home. "Sarah's mom asked if you were homeless." I remember laughing it off back then. Who cares what Sarah's mom thinks? I'm building something that's going to change the world. Elena rolled her eyes. "You're building junk in the garage, Rachel. Get real." But I kept building. While Elena perfected her makeup techniques and learned to sweet-talk her way into the popular crowd, I taught myself programming on an ancient computer Dad found in a dumpster. Elena thought I was wasting my time. Our parents thought I was avoiding reality. They all believed success looked like Elena, polished, presentable, playing by society's rules. The summer before my senior year, Elena landed an internship at First National Bank downtown. She was only 16, but she'd charmed the branch manager during a school field trip. She came home every day talking about the marble floors, the important-looking people in expensive suits, the way everyone spoke in hushed, respectful tones about money and investments. "This is real success, Rachel," she'd say, smoothing down her thrift store blazer. "Not whatever you're doing with those computer things." I'd gotten early acceptance to MIT that same summer, full scholarship. But Elena barely acknowledged it. Mom and Dad were proud, sure, but they didn't understand what it meant. They kept asking when I was going to get a real job like Elena. The night before I left for college, Elena and I had our last real conversation as the sisters we used to be. "You're making a mistake," she said, sitting on her perfectly made bed while I stuffed my few belongings into a secondhand suitcase. "College is expensive, and all that computer stuff is just a phase. You should stay here, get a job at the bank with me. I could put in a good word." I looked at her, really looked at her. At 17, Elena had transformed herself into everything our parents had dreamed of. Professional, polished, practical. But somewhere along the way, she'd lost the little girl who used to believe I could change the world. "I'm going to build something amazing, Elena. Something that matters." She shrugged, already turning back to her fashion magazine. "Let me know how that works out for you." Those were the last words we spoke for 15 years. College was everything I'd hoped for and more. While Elena was learning to process loan applications and charm bank customers, I was diving deep into artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, spending 18-hour days in the computer lab, but I was alive in a way I'd never been before. By my junior year, I developed an algorithm that could predict market trends with 94% accuracy. By graduation, 3 venture capital firms were fighting over the rights to fund my startup. By 25, my company, Data Vista Analytics, was the go-to platform for Fortune 500 companies making billion-dollar investment decisions. I thought about calling Elena 1,000 times during those early years. I wanted to share my excitement when we landed our first major client. I wanted to tell her about the night we hit our first million in revenue, how I'd sat in my tiny apartment and cried with relief. I wanted her to know that the weird little sister she'd been embarrassed of was actually making it. But every time I picked up the phone, I remembered her last words. "Let me know how that works out for you." The dismissive tone. The certainty that I was deluding myself, so I didn't call. I threw myself into work instead. Meanwhile, Elena was building her own version of success. I'd check her social media occasionally. She'd accepted my friend request years ago, but never interacted with my posts. Her Instagram was a carefully curated showcase of her rise through the banking world, promotions every 2 years, professional headshots in increasingly expensive suits, photos from company galas where she rubbed shoulders with the city's financial elite. She'd made it to head branch manager at First National by age 30. In her most recent photos, she looked polished and confident, standing behind her mahogany desk with a view of downtown skyline. The comments were full of praise. Goals? Queen, living your best life. What Elena didn't know, what nobody in our family knew, was that 5 years ago, Data Vista had gone public. The IPO was the 3rd largest tech debut in NASDAQ history. Overnight, my 60% stake in the company was worth $4.2 billion. I'd made Forbes' 40 under 40 list. TechCrunch called me the Oracle of Wall Street. Harvard Business School taught case studies about my algorithms, but I still dressed like the girl from Queens who bought her clothes at thrift stores. I still drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. I still lived in a modest apartment, though now it was by choice rather than necessity. Money hadn't changed who I was at my core. It had just given me the freedom to be more myself. But Elena had changed completely. The transformation was gradual according to former neighbors I'd stayed in touch with. Success had gone to her head in ways that success never had to mine. She'd moved out of Queens to a luxury condo in Manhattan. She drove a BMW. She'd had cosmetic work done, subtle, expensive procedures that enhanced her natural beauty, but somehow made her seem less real. More concerning were the stories I heard about how she treated people. Mrs. Rodriguez, who still lived next door to our parents, told me Elena had visited last Christmas with her new boyfriend, some investment banker who kept checking his Rolex during dinner. Elena had barely spoken to Dad, seemed embarrassed by the small apartment, and made cutting remarks about Mom's cooking. "She's not the same girl," Mrs. Rodriguez had whispered to me over the phone. "Success changed her, mija, and not in a good way." But the worst stories came from people who'd encountered Elena at work. She'd developed a reputation for being cold, dismissive, even cruel to customers she deemed beneath her. She'd created an unofficial policy of fast-tracking wealthy clients while making working-class customers wait in longer lines. She'd been heard making comments about people's clothing, their accents, their apparent financial status. "Elena Martinez thinks she's better than everyone," one online review of the bank read. "She treats you like garbage if you don't look rich enough for her taste." The Elena I remembered, the little girl who used to split her last piece of candy with me, had become someone who judged people by their appearance, their bank account balance, their perceived social status. She'd forgotten where she came from, she'd forgotten who she used to be, and she'd forgotten that sometimes the most valuable things come in unremarkable packages. Which brings us to last Tuesday morning. I'd been having trouble sleeping lately. Too much caffeine, too many late nights monitoring Asian markets. I decided to take a walk through the old neighborhood, maybe grab breakfast at the diner where Dad used to take us on Sunday mornings. The walk took me past First National Bank, the downtown branch where Elena worked. I'd driven by it countless times over the years, but never went in. What would be the point? Elena had made it clear she wanted nothing to do with her impractical sister, but something made me stop that morning. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was 15 years of hurt feelings finally demanding resolution. Maybe I just wanted to see who my sister had become with my own eyes. I was dressed for a casual walk, faded jeans with a small tear in the knee, a college sweatshirt I'd had since graduation, old white sneakers that had seen better days. My hair was in a messy ponytail, no makeup, just me in my most comfortable, authentic form. The bank was everything Elena's Instagram had promised. Marble floors that echoed with each footstep, soaring ceilings with crystal chandeliers, mahogany desks polished to mirror perfection. The whole place screamed expensive, exclusive, important. I approached the teller line just planning to open a small checking account, something that would require Elena's approval as branch manager. I wanted to see if she'd recognize me. I wanted to see if 15 years had softened her edges at all. The teller, a young man who couldn't have been older than 22, looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone suggesting he'd rather be doing literally anything else. "I'd like to withdraw some money from my account," I said simply. He glanced at my appearance again. "Do you have an account with us?" "I'd like to open one, actually. Maybe withdraw about $100 to start." That's when I heard it. A sharp, derisive laugh from behind the teller counter. "Marcus, what's taking so long?" The voice was familiar but different, colder, more commanding than I remembered. Elena appeared from her office, looking every inch the successful bank executive. Her suit probably cost more than our parents made in a month. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup flawless, her jewelry subtle but expensive. She looked like she'd stepped out of a banking industry magazine, and she looked at me like I was something she'd found stuck to the bottom of her designer shoe. "Ma'am," she said, not recognizing me, but clearly recognizing what she saw as my social class. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. We have legitimate customers waiting." The words hit me like a physical blow. Legitimate customers. As if I wasn't legitimate because of how I looked. "I just want to open an account and withdraw $100, I said quietly. Elena's expression shifted to something between disgust and annoyance. "Listen, we don't serve—" She paused, looking me over once more. "We don't serve people who can't meet our minimum account requirements. This isn't a check-cashing place." The entire bank had gone quiet. Other customers were staring. The security guard was taking a step closer. Marcus the teller was looking everywhere except at me, and then Elena said the words that would change everything. "We don't serve beggars here." The word beggars hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I felt every eye in the bank turn toward me, some with pity, others with embarrassment for witnessing such a public humiliation. A few people had their phones out, probably recording what they thought was just another viral moment of someone being mistreated for their appearance. But this wasn't just anyone being humiliated. This was Elena Martinez calling her own sister a beggar, and she had no idea who she was talking to. I stood there for a moment, absorbing the full weight of what had just happened. 15 years of wondering if my sister had changed. 15 years of hoping that maybe, deep down, she was still the little girl who used to defend me when neighborhood kids made fun of my hand-me-down clothes. 15 years of holding on to the possibility that family still meant something to her. All of that hope died in that marble-floored bank lobby. I looked at Elena, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing my sister's face. The warmth that used to live in her eyes had been replaced by cold calculation. The smile that used to be genuine now seemed practiced, professional, fake. She'd become everything she thought she wanted to be, but in the process, she'd lost everything that actually mattered. "Excuse me?" I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Elena sighed dramatically like I was personally ruining her day. "You heard me. This is First National Bank, not a homeless shelter. If you can't afford our services, there's a community credit union about 6 blocks down that might be more appropriate for your situation. She said appropriate, like it tasted bad in her mouth. Around us, I could hear whispers starting. Someone's phone was definitely recording now. The security guard was moving closer, clearly expecting Elena to ask him to escort me out. Marcus the teller looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. To his credit, he seemed uncomfortable with Elena's behavior, but he wasn't about to challenge his boss in front of everyone. Actually, I said, reaching into my worn canvas bag, I think there might be some confusion. I'd like to make a withdrawal from my other account. Elena's eyebrows shot up. Other account? Ma'am, I think you're confused about... I pulled out a platinum card that caught the light from the chandeliers above. It wasn't flashy, wasn't covered in logos or gold trim. To most people, it would look like any other credit card. But to someone in banking, the subtle platinum finish and the distinctive logo would be immediately recognizable. It was a J.P. Morgan private bank card, the kind they only issue to clients with at least $10 million in assets. Elena's expression shifted slightly. The smug certainty faltered for just a moment before her professional mask slipped back into place. That's interesting, she said, her voice losing some of its earlier venom. But anyone can get a platinum card these days. The real question is whether you can actually afford to use it. The whispers around us got louder. A few people started pulling out their own phones. This was turning into quite a show. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd managed since walking into this place. You're absolutely right to be cautious, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Identity theft is such a problem these days. Why don't I provide some additional verification? I reached into my bag again and pulled out my driver's license, placing it on the marble counter between us. Rachel Martinez, I said clearly, and I'd like to access account number 447-921-8834. Elena glanced at the license, and I saw the exact moment recognition hit her. Her face went white. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked at the license, then at my face, then back at the license. Rachel? She whispered. Hello, Elena. It's been a while. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Elena's professional composure cracked completely, replaced by shock, confusion, and the dawning realization that she'd just publicly humiliated her own sister. But she wasn't ready to back down yet. 15 years of success, of being the important one, the practical one, the sister who'd made something of herself. That identity was too precious to let go of without a fight. This is impossible, she stammered, then seemed to catch herself. I mean, even if you are, you still can't just walk in here looking like that and expect special treatment. Looking like what, exactly? I asked, my voice still calm, but with an edge that made several nearby customers take a step back. Elena's face flushed. She was trapped now, caught between her public persona and the family drama that was spiraling out of control in front of her customers. You know what I mean, she said, but her voice was weaker now. Professional standards, appropriate attire, basic respect for the institution. Basic respect, I repeated. That's interesting coming from someone who just called her own sister a beggar in front of a room full of strangers. The whispers around us had turned into low murmurs. People were definitely recording now. This was the kind of content that went viral in hours. Bank manager humiliates customer who turns out to be her long-lost sister. Marcus cleared his throat nervously. Ma'am, about that account number you mentioned. Elena shot him a sharp look. Marcus, I can handle this. But Marcus was already typing into his computer, and his expression was changing from nervous confusion to wide-eyed shock. Ms. Martinez, he said to Elena, his voice barely above a whisper. You might want to look at this. Elena leaned over his shoulder to look at the screen, and I watched her face cycle through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, recognition, and finally, pure terror. Because there it was, in black and white on the bank's computer system, account balance, $3,547,132, $441.67, $3.5 billion. Elena stared at the screen like it might bite her. This has to be some kind of mistake, a computer error, or— No mistake, I said. I'd like to make a withdrawal, please. Let's start with that $100 I mentioned. The entire bank had gone silent. Even the background music seemed to have stopped. Marcus was staring at his computer screen like he'd never seen numbers that large before. Elena was gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles had turned white. I need to call my supervisor, Elena whispered. Actually, I said, I think this requires the regional manager. Withdrawals over $1 billion usually do. Over $1 billion? Elena's voice was barely audible. Well, I was thinking more like $3 billion. Round numbers, you know, easier to process. That's when the bank's computer system started having problems. Not because of any technical issue, but because transactions of that magnitude triggered automatic security protocols. Red flags started appearing on screens throughout the building. Phones started ringing in offices upstairs. The regional manager's direct line began buzzing insistently. Elena was still staring at the account balance when her assistant manager, a middle-aged man named David, came rushing out of the back offices. Elena, what's going on? The system is flagging a massive transaction attempt, and corporate is calling every extension in the building. Elena opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just pointed weakly at the computer screen. David looked at the account information, then at me standing there in my torn jeans and old sneakers, then back at the screen. Holy shit, he whispered, apparently forgetting where he was. Language, David, I said with a small smile. We're in a professional environment. That's when Elena's legs gave out. She didn't faint dramatically or anything like that. She just crumpled. Slowly sank to her knees behind the counter, her designer suit pooling around her, her perfectly styled hair falling in her face. Rachel, she whispered, and for the first time in 15 years, she sounded like my little sister again. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't recognize you. I would never have— Would never have what? I asked. Treated me like that? Or would never have treated anyone like that? She looked up at me from her position on the floor, tears starting to smudge her perfect makeup. I don't know. I don't know what happened to me. The regional manager chose that moment to arrive. James Patterson was a man in his 60s who'd been in banking longer than I'd been alive. He burst through the front doors like the building was on fire, which, from a financial perspective, it kind of was. "Where's Ms. Martinez?" he demanded, looking around frantically. "I got a call that someone was attempting to withdraw over $3 billion, which is absolutely impossible unless—" He stopped when he saw me standing at the counter, and his expression immediately shifted to one of recognition and panic. "Ms. Martinez," he said, rushing toward me with his hand extended. "Rachel Martinez, right? From Data Vista Analytics? I am so incredibly sorry for whatever confusion led to you being here instead of in our private client suite. This is absolutely unacceptable." I shook his hand calmly. "Actually, Mr. Patterson, there's no confusion. I came in to conduct some business, and your branch manager, Elena, provided exactly the level of service I expected." Mr. Patterson's face went through several colors as he processed what I was saying. His eyes moved from me to Elena, who was still on her knees behind the counter, tears streaming down her face. "Elena," he said slowly, "Ms. Martinez is one of our most valued clients. Her account represents nearly $4 billion in assets. Please tell me you didn't—" "She called me a beggar," I said simply. "In front of your entire lobby, told me you don't serve people like me. Suggested I try the community credit union down the street because it would be more appropriate for my situation." Mr. Patterson looked like he was going to have a heart attack. "Elena, please tell me this isn't true." Elena tried to stand up using the counter for support. Her legs were shaking. "James, she looked— how was I supposed to know?" "You were supposed to treat every customer with respect and dignity," he said, his voice cold. "That's Banking 101. That's basic human decency." "But look at her," Elena said, desperation creeping into her voice. "Look how she's dressed. Anyone would have made the same assumption." The lobby was packed now. Word had spread somehow, and people were crowding around to see what was happening. Phones were recording everything. This was going to be all over social media within the hour. "Actually," said a voice from the crowd, "I think you're wrong about that." An elderly man in a worn cardigan stepped forward. I recognized him as one of the customers who'd been waiting in line when Elena first humiliated me. "I've been banking here for 30 years, he said, addressing Mr. Patterson, "and I've never seen anyone treated the way this young lady was treated today. Your branch manager was cruel, discriminatory, and completely unprofessional. And frankly, the way she's trying to justify it now makes it even worse." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Other customers started speaking up, sharing their own experiences with Elena's prejudicial treatment. "She made my daughter wait 20 minutes while she fast-tracked someone in an expensive suit who arrived after us. She asked me if I was sure I could afford to open an account here. She literally rolled her eyes when I said I wanted to apply for a small business loan." Elena looked around at the sea of faces, all of them accusatory, all of them disappointed. This was her community, her professional reputation, her carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. I was just doing my job," she whispered. "Maintaining standards, protecting the bank's interests." "Whose standards?" I asked. "Certainly not the bank's." "Mr. Patterson, what is First National's official policy regarding customer service and discrimination?" Mr. Patterson straightened his tie nervously. "We serve all customers with equal respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance, background, or account balance. Discrimination of any kind is grounds for immediate termination." The word termination hit Elena like a physical blow. She sank back down to her knees, this time covering her face with her hands. "Please," she whispered, "please don't fire me. This job is everything I have. It's who I am." And that's when I realized the tragedy of what had happened to my sister. Her job hadn't just become her identity, it had become her entire sense of self-worth. She'd tied her value as a human being so completely to her professional success that she'd lost sight of everything else that mattered, including basic human decency. "Elena," I said softly, kneeling down to her level, "look at me." She raised her head slowly, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Do you remember when we were kids and Miguel Santos used to make fun of my secondhand clothes?" She nodded slightly. "Do you remember what you did?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I told him that clothes don't make a person, that you were the smartest, kindest person I knew, and he was just jealous because he could never be half as good as you. That's right, you defended me. You saw past the surface to who I really was. What happened to that girl, Elena?" She broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands. "I don't know. I wanted to be successful so badly. I wanted to prove I was important, that I mattered. And somewhere along the way, I started thinking that meant other people had to matter less." The crowd around us had quieted, watching this intensely personal moment unfold. Mr. Patterson was looking increasingly uncomfortable, clearly wanting to resolve the situation, but not sure how. I made a decision. "Mr. Patterson," I said, standing up, "I'd like to make a proposal." He nodded eagerly. "Of course, Ms. Martinez, whatever you need." "I don't want Elena fired, but I do want her to understand the impact of her actions. I want her to spend 1 month working in customer service at the community credit union she recommended to me. I want her to see what it's like to serve people who might not look successful, but who deserve respect anyway." Elena looked up at me with surprise and something that might have been hope. "And," I continued, "I want her to complete bias training and community service. 30 hours at a local homeless shelter, serving meals and listening to people's stories. I want her to remember that everyone has value, regardless of their circumstances." Mr. Patterson was nodding enthusiastically. "Yes, absolutely. We can arrange all of that. Elena keeps her job, but with a formal reprimand and mandatory training. But most importantly," I said, looking directly at Elena, "I want my sister back, the real Elena, the one who knew that kindness matters more than appearances." Elena stood up slowly, wiping her eyes. "You'd really do that for me?" After what I just put you through, we're family, Elena. That still means something to me, even if it took you a while to remember. She threw her arms around me then, hugging me tighter than she had since we were children. I'm so sorry, Rachel. I'm so sorry. I lost myself somewhere along the way, and I almost lost you too. You didn't lose me, I said, hugging her back. I've been right here the whole time, waiting for you to remember who you really are. 3 months later, Elena completed her community service and bias training. She'd been working at the credit union, and the experience had completely changed her perspective. She called me every week, sharing stories about the customers she was serving, elderly people on fixed incomes, immigrants sending money to family overseas, single mothers trying to build better lives for their children. I used to think success meant looking down on other people, she told me during one of our phone calls. But real success means lifting other people up. She'd also started therapy, working through the insecurities and fears that had driven her to become someone she didn't recognize. It wasn't easy work, but she was committed to it. The viral video of our confrontation at the bank had indeed spread across social media, but not in the way Elena had feared. Instead of destroying her reputation, it had become a powerful story about the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect. People were inspired by our reconciliation, by the fact that family bonds could survive even the worst betrayals. Elena had been promoted back to her assistant manager role, but she approached it completely differently now. First National had implemented new customer service training based on our experience, and Elena had become one of their most effective trainers. And me? I'd finally found a way to use my success that felt meaningful. I'd established the Martinez Family Foundation, providing college scholarships for kids from working-class families who showed potential in STEM fields. Elena helped me review applications, and her experience with community banking gave her insights into which candidates would benefit most from the support. We had dinner together every Sunday now, usually at our parents' house in Queens. Elena would arrive in her sensible sedan instead of the BMW, dressed casually, bringing flowers for Mom and stories about the customers she'd helped that week. You know what the best part is? She told me one evening as we walked through our old neighborhood. I actually like who I am now. For the first time in years, I look in the mirror and recognize the person staring back at me. That's when I knew we'd both finally made it. Not to some arbitrary definition of success imposed by society, but to something much more valuable. Authenticity, compassion, and the knowledge that real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the positive impact you have on other people's lives. Elena had learned that the hard way, but she'd learned it. And in doing so, she'd given me back something I'd thought was lost forever. My sister. The little girl who used to split her candy with me was still there. Underneath all those years of professional ambition and social climbing, she just needed a reminder of who she really was. And sometimes the most valuable reminders come in the most unexpected packages.